Hello and welcome to another video. So we have all the post-nerf stuff going on at the moment, and to kick things off I thought why not play SwordCraft. SwordCraft usually does fairly well in an early meta, so why not give it a go. Plus they're not super expensive. I mean, they are running a lot of legendaries these days, but most of those cards can be swapped out. I mean, Mars put in any kind of really nice 3-drop. Won't fill exactly that spot, but will still do a pretty good job. Any Storm can fill both Zeta and Commander Celia's spot. And really, other than that, I'm just running some kind of decent top-end cards that can give me that extra push. Really though, if I was going to run any, definitely Sky Commander. Gives you that little aggressive push and can really help out. So we're going to get right into this and check it out. So our first matchup is against Forest. Forest seems to be fairly popular in the current ladder, although don't know how it's performing. I mean, it's very early days after the nerfs, and I'm sure it will take at least the first weekish before we really settle into a groove with it. So I tend to drop those 3-drops. I don't really like them in my opener. I'd much rather keep a decent 2-drop and probably aim for something just a little bit better. Starting off with the Rapier Master is a pretty decent move against Forest, as it does pretty well. Definitely stopping a lot of those early fairy plays, which is a fairly good advantage to have in that early game. And of course, Servant of Usurping is really quite decent, being able to pretty much outvalue every single fairy played, as it will just constantly boost out of range of its damage. And then Magical Marksman, pretty much completing the perfect curve I could want as far as my board goes, with my opponent not really playing too many big cards. But of course, they did a fairly decent removal strategy there, getting to keep their insect. But not really a lot else going on. All I can really do now is try and fill the board at least a little bit to stop any bigger plays from coming down. Peeler's shot though is going to clear us up quite nicely. Little disappointing. Probably not the most optimal way to make that play, but I mean, it worked out all the same for them. Fatal Spell Bomb will pick up the clear either way, and we'll just gain a fairly decent board. So this is where Forest seems to really fall behind in these matchups against Sword. Sword develops quite a bigger board at quite a more rapid speed, really just stopping Forest from being able to flood and get a lot of chip damage in, which is a big advantage to have against Forest. Of course, that doesn't stop them doing some pretty nice plays. I mean, I've definitely lost to Forest with Sword. It's definitely not an unwinnable matchup for the Forest player, but definitely an uphill battle in my experience, especially with the current cards. They've got a lot of decent removal now, at least as far as single target removal goes for Sword, and a lot of cards that can really hurt the Forest player's decks. Of course, Yggdrasil's a pretty perfect play. It is going to be a pretty nice heal, which is definitely not what you want to go up against as a Sword. But you've definitely got a few options. Queen Magnus being one, and getting Usurping Spineblade is going to be fairly decent for that. We're going to be able to do a little bit of a stat boost to protect our board and go face for 4 more damage, pretty much negating their last turn heal. Doesn't mean things go perfectly smooth for us, as their board flood is pretty insane. Definitely not something I want to keep up with when Elf Song hits the board. But we're going to deal a pretty nice burst of damage now, being able to bring them all the way down to 1 this turn. Also, restacking our hand is pretty decent, although it's definitely a risk. I mean, we have a few ways to get 1 damage, which is why this risk was worthwhile. But outside of that, if they had have warded up or healed, we definitely could have been in a lot tougher spot. Omen of Craving, definitely not the card we want to see. It's going to be a nice way to clear this out and go face. But as long as we can get our victory next turn, we should be fine. Anything after that could be too difficult. Lucky for us, Apostle of Usurpation is going to be perfect, hitting that 1 damage we need to kill the Forest player. For our next opponent, we have Rune. Another not too surprising deck that people are playing at the moment, as Rune was expected to go up fairly consistently when the nerfs hit, mainly because Blood, and that was pretty much the only real bad matchup for Rune, at least from what I had seen in most of the meta. Most of the other decks were around a 50% kind of margin against Rune, but overall it was really Blood that held it back. Sword also does do quite a good job, but in its current form I don't know whether Rune could really be defeated easily by most of the decks around. It's really just a wait and see game at this point. Well, I can recommend, playing something like Sword in the early stages. As the couple of days kind of roll on, you'll definitely see a shift in the meta and things will change quite considerably. So I try to set up the best board I possibly can, while at the same time not have to worry about this Bane. Unfortunately, not going to work out too well, as I basically have to Fatal Spellbomb into the Mars to get any real value out of this hand. Getting the 4 damage at least is something, and it was probably the best play I had available for that turn. An Adorable Alchemist is not going to work very well. I mean, Kaglastra is going to be a rough one to have to beat out, considering it's just pure value as a card. It's nice that we absorb most of that value with the board, but at the same time we're losing our pretty much foothold in this game. And without much to really play on turn 5, I really didn't have a choice but to go for that. Frontline Cavalier, though, is a reasonable play to restock our board when our opponent pretty much has nothing. It's kind of a bonus that they pretty much wasted their turn last turn. But Class President Hannah isn't going to be a very nice guard to fight. Although we should have a reasonable chance at setting up lethal for turn 8. All we can really do is hold off, as we are just going to buff these and Evo to go for a pretty comfortable 8 damage. With the 3 on ambush, we only need the Dragonites for 4. We're just hoping there isn't 1 any healing or 2 a ward. They're the only 2 cards at this stage that would really screw us over. As going for lethal at this point really isn't an option for them. So they would be the only things that would have been a problem. Lucky for us, neither are a problem, and we're going to pretty easily get this lethal straight to the face. So I hope you guys do enjoy this deck. This is actually one that's kind of a mixed bag, honestly. 50% overall, most of which were against Forest, which is definitely inflating its win rate a little overall. I haven't got too much variety, which is probably the problem at the moment, especially since this is right after nerfs and I haven't had a lot of time to mess around yet, but I really want to get this video out for you today as we are getting close to the end of the month, so I just wanted to make sure we round out the month with a consistent daily video. So if you guys did enjoy this, hit the like button and subscribe. Until next time, see ya.